Hey guys, thanks for joining me for the episode of Learn to Play Games. My name is Lance, and today we're going to take a look at Star Wars Rebellion. This is a newer game by Fantasy Flight Games. It is a 1 to 2 player game that could be also played as a team of 2 to 4 players. It takes roughly 2 to 4 hours to play, and it is a competitive game, so the players are all working against each other to meet their objectives first and be the overall winners, unless you're playing a team game, which obviously then one team is competing against the other team. So in the game itself, this is the galactic scale game where you have all these different planets on the board, and the Imperial player is going through and playing all their big units like their Death Star and Star Destroyers and Super Star Destroyers, trying to take these planets over and figure out where the Rebel base is hidden. Now on the Rebel side, they have a lot of their iconic units as well, as such as the Mon Calamari cruiser and the Corvette and the air speeders for the ground units and all these different things. Really, really cool. And so basically the Rebel player is basically trying to keep the Rebel base hidden, as well as he's basically trying to buy time. Each round, the time marker is going to move up on the track, and if he is able to meet certain things for his objective cards, then he's going to move the Rebel marker down as well. And if those markers ever meet, then the Rebel player has won the game. And so it's a race against time for the Imperial player to find the Rebel base and to destroy it. So that being said, my opinions of this game so far are really good. I've had a lot of fun with this one. Fantasy Flight has done an amazing job with this license. Every single Star Wars game so far that I've had a chance to play from Fantasy Flight has been really well done. The rule sets are very, very good, and they just really bring out the flavor of Star Wars, and you really feel like you're part of the action. You jump in and you're doing these different things depending upon the game that you've chosen to play. So I definitely recommend pretty much any Fantasy Flight game for Star Wars, but this is a really good one if you like those big galactic scale games. And like I said, you're going to have a lot of theme in this one. The players are going to be going on missions to sabotage one another or gain control over different planets by diplomatic means, combat missions and all kinds of different things, and grand combat between space units and ground units and all these different things. And they've done a really good job of mixing that together and making a quality game. So other than that, the other big thing that I really like about this is the way that the rules are set up. Obviously, the first thing, I'm not a big fan of the two rule books, which is something that Fantasy Flight has done for a while. They like splitting the rule books into a basic playbook where it teaches you how to play without all the heavy rules, which can be helpful. And then they have a rules reference book that basically goes into everything and really gives you all the different things. Obviously, I would love to just see a complete rule book with all the stuff included. They could do a separate rule book with the Learn to Play stuff, but I would really like a fully comprehensive rule book where the rules reference does that, but it doesn't give you all the examples and stuff like that. There's not as many pictures and things to guide you. Just my own personal preference. But like I said, other than that, the rule set itself is very good. It has a lot of tactical capabilities and gives you a lot of options, but it doesn't make it too complex. The game itself is fairly easy to teach, and as you guys will see, after you've played a couple rounds, you'll probably get a good idea of how the game plays. Now, it's going to take a game or two for you to figure out all the little intimacies and different things that you guys are capable of doing, and then you're really going to start seeing the tactical aspects of the game come out, as both players at that point are pretty familiar with the game. They pretty much have a good idea of what they need to do and how to achieve it. So then it's really getting into your opponent's head and trying to figure out all the different things that they're trying to do to you. So that's what I really like. There's a lot of depth to this game without a lot of complexity, which is a great game. So let's go ahead and head to the table, and I'll teach you guys how to play. There are two different sets of dice included in Star Wars Rebellion, and both of these sets have exactly the same icons on them. The only difference is their color, which is only going to matter during combat, which we're going to cover a little bit later when we cover combat. So each dice will have one side that will have the dual lightsabers. We'll have 2 hits, 1 direct hit, and there'll be 2 blank sides on each dice. And the dice that are included in the game are the maximum number of dice that you can have. So during a mission, the maximum number of dice you can roll is 10 dice, and during combat, you can have a maximum of 5 red and 5 black, as we'll cover this more later. Here we have the action decks. There will be one for the Rebels and one for the Imperials. At the beginning of the game, you're going to separate the action decks into the cards that'll have the recruitment icon in the bottom corner, and to those that do not, which are the starting action cards. If you're playing a basic game, then you can go ahead and return the starting action cards to the box, both for the Rebels and the Imperials. If you're playing an advanced game, then go ahead and shuffle both of these decks up separately and deal 2 Rebel cards to the Rebel player and 2 Imperial cards to the Imperial player. Other than that, then each of the action decks is going to be placed on the side of the player board, and during the recruitment step, which we're going to cover a little bit later, each player is going to draw 2 of these cards and select 1 to keep. Each of these cards is going to have the card's name at the top, and then what phase they can use that card, the effects of the card, and which leader or leaders can use the card or must be present in order for that card to be used. And we're going to go into that a little bit more later as well. The probe deck will have 1 card for every system in the game except for Coruscant. From here, then, each card is going to have the name of the planet on the top, the image of the planet, and then this icon over here is only going to be used in the advanced game during setup, which there will be a number of cards that will have the Imperial symbol and Rebel symbol, and those will help determine where the players are going to deploy during that time. And then we have a map that shows where this planet is located on the map, where the highlighted section is, for quick and easy reference. Both the Rebel and Imperial players have mission decks, so let's go ahead and look at how these are set up at the beginning of the game. So the Rebel player will grab their mission deck and separate the 4 starting mission cards that'll have the little looped arrow at the bottom. These are Sabotage, Rapid Mobilization, Infiltration, and Build Alliance. These cards will be added to the player's hands. The rest of the cards will be shuffled up and placed on the player's dashboard in the mission section, as you guys will see later. Then we'll look at a breakdown of these cards. So at the top of the card is the name of the card, as well as the minimum number of skill icons of that skill, which there are 4 different skills. You have Spec Ops, Logistics, Intel, and Diplomacy. Then at the bottom of the card is the different effects of that card, and whether it is an attempt or a resolve effect, which we're going to cover a little bit more later on during resolving missions. And then, like I said, each of these cards is going to have a minimum requirement on it, so let's look at the leaders real quick and outline how that works. So Princess Leia here has a number of skill icons on her token here for Intel, Diplomacy, and Spec Ops. So those are the only missions she can go on. She cannot go on logistical missions. And again, you must have the number of icons that are shown on the mission. From there, then each leader is also, some of the leaders are going to have icons at the bottom here for tactics cards. So if they're in a combat, they can draw a number of space tactic cards and ground tactic cards. And for the Imperial player, you'll separate their starting cards, which are Gather Intel, Capture Rebel Operative, Research and Development, and Rule by Fear. These will be their starting cards in their hands. From there, the rest of the mission cards can be separated into 2 decks. The Projects deck, which will have the little star icon at the bottom of each card that is for the Projects deck. That deck will be shuffled up and placed on the game board in the Projects section. Then the rest of the mission cards again will be shuffled up and placed on the Imperial player's dashboard, as you guys will see later. The Rebel player will be using an objective deck. The objective cards will have a listing of when they can be used, so this one can only be used at the start of the refresh phase. And then there's going to be a certain set of conditions that the Rebel player must meet in order to play the card. If he's met those conditions, then he will gain a number of reputation points equal to the number in the corner here. And then each card will have a name. At the beginning of the game, you're going to break this into 3 different decks, stages 1, 2, and 3. You'll shuffle each of those stages separately and then stack the stages. Stages 2 will go on 3 and stage 1 will go on top of 2. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We'll separate these. There's stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. So shuffling up stage 3, stage 2, and stage 1. And then once this deck is shuffled completely, it'll go in the top corner on the objective spot on the game board. Moving over to the player's dashboards now, we have the Imperial player and the Rebel player's dashboards, and they basically work the same way. Each dashboard is going to give a breakdown of the units that the player has access to, when they're going to be built, as you guys will see on the game board, and their attack stats. So we have the number of attack dice they throw when they attack. So the TIE Fighter will throw 1 black dice and no red dice. And their number of hit points that they have, as well as the color of the hits they're required to hit them. So the TIE Fighter will go down with black hits, where such as the Star Destroyer will take red hits from red dice to bring them down. But we're going to cover this more in combat, as there's other circumstances there as well. And then each unit, if it can transport other units, will have a number in its space, such as the Assault Cruiser or Star Destroyer, where the TIE Fighter, it has a chain, which means that another unit must transport it for it to move, as the ground units have that as well. And then you'll notice for the Imperial player that you have these card pictures, which means that in order to build these units, you'll have to have project cards that will allow you to do so. And you'll see that a little bit more later as well. Moving over to the Rebel player, the only difference that they have with theirs is that they have a couple of ground structures as opposed to ground units. And these will be built the same way, and they will have special abilities that are going to be active on those planets. But now with the ground structures, they cannot be moved. Once they are built, that is where they will stay. They can't be transported with transport units. And then let's cover setup real quick. So basic setup is going to be that each player is going to receive their 4 leaders. So the Rebel player has their 4, and the Imperial player will have their 4. Then each player is going to receive their action deck, as described already, how you can set those up. They will receive their mission decks. And then each player will get their starting hand of mission cards, as we already outlined. From here, we're ready to move over to the board and see how that's set up. Before moving into setup, I just want to cover the features of the game board real quick. So first off, the game board itself is broken into 8 different sectors, and each sector is going to be separated by these orange lines that go around it. Each sector is also going to comprise 4 different planets, so our middle one here has Dathomir, Mandalore, Kashyyyk, and Malastare, and that is one sector. Now there's other features as well. You'll notice these big orange blotches on the board. Now these spaces cannot be passed through by units, so units on Yavin cannot pass through this zone to make it to Dantooine. And same for Dantooine, it cannot pass through to go to Yavin, and there's going to be a number of those on the board. There are 2 different types of planets on the game board. The first, the majority of the planets, is going to be a populous planet, which is going to have a space for a loyalty marker to be placed, and is also going to have production icons for the different types of units that planet can produce. When a unit does produce units, those units are going to go in the build queue based on the number that is on the side here. Then we also have remote planets, which do not have any of those things listed. They can still be landed on, and players can still fight over them, and the Rebel base could still be on there, so the Imperial player is going to want to check those as well, but they don't grant any bonuses to any players. With board setup, you have 2 options. There is the basic version, and then there's the advanced version. I'm going to go ahead and take you guys through the basic version, but basically the only difference with the advanced version is instead of doing the basic setup, you would go ahead and grab the probe deck and reveal planets on the probe deck until you come up with 5 Imperial planets and 3 Rebel planets. Once you have done that, those will be the planets the players will deploy on. For the Imperial player, the first 2 are going to be the subjugated planets, where you'll place a subjugation token on them, and the last 3 planets will be Imperial loyal planets. From there, then the players will receive the amount of units that are listed in the rulebook, and they will be able to deploy them on the planets that they've gotten this game. So other than that, with the basic setup, you're going to come over here and place the time token on the number 1 space, and the reputation token, or the rebellion symbol, on the number 14 space. Then you're going to go ahead and place out the objectives deck, as we already outlined how to set that up for the Rebel player, and the projects deck down here for the Imperial player. Then the players can go ahead and deploy their units. So with us playing the basic game, all the units are outlined on the back of the rulebook. From here, we're ready to have the Rebel player choose his location for his secret Rebel base. So go ahead and grab the probe deck, remove all of the cards for the planets that the Imperial player is on. From there, then the Rebel player can go through the deck and choose one of the planets that he wants to have his secret Rebel base on. So let's go ahead and say we have a Rebel base on Endor. So that card is going to be flipped over and placed in the location spots over here underneath the board. The rest of the probe deck can be shuffled back up so that there's no particular order in it and the players don't know how it looks. And then it'll go in the probe location. So the last thing we need to do before starting the game, for the rebel player, he's going to draw the top card of the objective deck, and he's going to keep all these cards hidden from the Imperial player. And then each player is going to draw the top 2 cards of their mission deck. So each player will start the game with 6 mission cards. The first phase in a round is the assignment phase. During this phase, the rebel player will start by assigning any of his leaders to missions. When he is finished, then the Imperial player will do the same. To do this, a player places a mission card from his hand face down and then chooses 1 or 2 of his leaders from the pool and places them on top of it. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. We have the rebel player here. He's going to go ahead and go through his mission cards and see if there's any he wants to play. So let's go ahead and start with Sabotage. This requires a leader. They have at least 1 Spec Ops skill icon on their board. So we have Leia, the General, between those 2. So let's go ahead and have the General go on it. And then let's go ahead and do Build Alliance. This is a Diplomacy one. And again, so we could have all 3 of our characters go on this one. So let's go ahead and do, we'll go with Princess Leia. We'll send her on it. And I think that'll do it for that. From there, then we'll head over to the Imperial player to select his. And let's see, we'll have the Imperial player do Rule by Fear. And he's going to have the Emperor Palpatine go on that one. And I think that'll be it. The second phase in a round is the command phase. Starting with the rebel player, the players are going to alternate going back and forth, taking turns. During the player's turn, they can perform 1 of 2 actions, which is to activate a system or to reveal a mission. They can also choose to pass, but once a player passes, they're not allowed to activate any other systems or reveal any mission cards that they still might have hidden. But they can still react to other players by opposing their missions, if they have any leaders left in their pool. So let's go ahead and take a look at each of these actions in more depth. The first action we're going to look at is to activate a system. To do this, you're going to use one of the leaders from your pool, and you're going to place it into any system, making it the active system. When his system is activated, he's going to move any of his ships from adjacent systems to the activated one. Now, a player cannot move units out of a system that already contains one of his faction leaders, and if a faction leader does not have tactics value, then it cannot activate a system. Each ship can bring a number of ground units equal to its transport value, and for the Imperial player, if he wishes to move ties, they are also going to need to be transported. After moving a unit into a system that contains opposing units, the player must resolve a combat, which we're going to cover a little bit later. And then for the Imperial player, if after the Imperial player moves ground units to a system, the rebel player must declare whether or not the rebel base is in that system. If it is, then he's going to flip over his probe card face up and place all the units from the rebel base space onto that system. From there, then they're going to go ahead and resolve a combat. Let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this now. So we have our rebel player here, and we want to move on to Nal Hutta. So we're going to go ahead and grab one of our rebel leaders that has the tactics value, which are the little numbers in the bottom corners, and we'll move him there. And this will activate this system, which means that we can move any rebel units from any of the adjacent systems onto that system. Well, our first 2 don't have any rebel units, but our third one does. So we're going to move the rebel transport, which will let us move up to 4 ground units if we want to, but we're just going to move 2 of those guys, and we'll move the Y-Wing. Now, since we have a rebel leader there, if we chose to put another rebel leader here, we could not move any of these units from this system as it already has a rebel leader in it. The other option players have as an action performed during the command phase is to reveal a mission. To reveal a mission, the player chooses a face-down mission card that one of his leaders is assigned to, and flips it face up. If the card instructs an attempt to resolve, the player must declare the system in which he's attempting the mission. Then he's going to place his leader in the declared system. If this mission is attempted or resolved in the rebel base space, then the leader is placed in the rebel base space, and not the system where the rebel base is. If the card is listed as a resolve, then the card's ability is automatic and cannot be opposed. If the card lists an attempt, only performed if the mission succeeds, which automatically happens unless it is opposed. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. We're going to go ahead and say that we're going to move over to the Imperial player now, since we've already seen the role players do their turn. And the Imperial player only has one card that is hidden. So we're going to go ahead and reveal that card, which is Rule by Fear. And this card says, an attempt in any populous system that contains Imperial units, if successful, gain 1 loyalty in this system. So we're going to go ahead and place our leader in a system that the Imperial player has troops in. So we're going to go ahead and go into Mandalore, as he has troops in that system, and if he gains a loyalty, then that system will be loyal to him. At this point, since the Imperial player has chosen a mission with attempts in it, his opponent has a chance to send one leader from his leader pool to oppose that mission. So a rebel player can choose to send a leader from their leader pool, so they're going to send Mon Mothma to Mandalore to try to oppose this mission. At this point, then both players are going to count up all the symbols that match the symbol that is needed for the mission, which Rule by Fear is a diplomatic mission. So we're going to count up the number of diplomatic symbols on all of our leaders combined from each faction. So the rebel player could potentially have more leaders in here if other missions have been attempted in this system prior, and the same for the Imperial player. So both of our players have 3. So we're going to go ahead and roll 3 dice for each player. And it doesn't matter the color of the dice for this one. So we're going to go ahead and say that the Imperial player is rolling black and our Rebel player is rolling red. At this point, then we're going to count up all the symbols. So hits and direct hits are going to count as 1, and lightsabers are going to count as 2. So our Imperial player had rolled 3 to our Rebel player only rolling 1. So with that, if the player attempting a mission rolls more successes, he proceeds to carry out the successful results of the mission. If he rolls equal to or fewer, then the mission fails and he cannot perform the card's ability. So since our Imperial player succeeded, he gets to gain 1 loyalty in this system, which will add a Imperial marker to that system since it's a neutral system and it's no longer subjugated. Regardless of success or fail, if the player is resolving a starting mission card, it's going to be returned to his hand. So we have the half circle at the bottom for starting mission cards, and any other card is simply going to be discarded after use. The one other thing I want to go over real quick are some of the mission cards are going to have a picture of a certain character in the left corner as shown here. So with Retrieve the Plans, it shows a picture of Darth Vader. So if he is the leader that is going on this mission, when rolling dice, you're going to add 2 successes to dice rolls for Vader. Otherwise, any other Imperial player can go on this mission, it just won't add those extra bonuses. And this applies to both the Imperial players and the Rebel players for their missions. And then it'll kick back over to the Rebel player to again choose to either activate a system or reveal one of his cards. This will continue going back and forth between players until one or both players have either completed all of the things they want to do and they're out of leaders, or one or both players have passed. When a player passes, they cannot activate or reveal any more missions or activate any systems. But if they still have leaders in their pool, they can still oppose missions of the other player. But each player must choose an action each turn. So if a player doesn't want to choose an action, they have to pass. During setup, you're going to separate the tactics cards into their respective decks, which is the ground tactics cards and the space tactic cards. Each of these decks is going to be comprised of a number of different cards that will benefit the players in certain ways during combat. At the beginning of the combat, as you guys will see later, you're going to draw a number of these tactic cards based on the leader you're using. And each one of these cards is going to give you different effects, such as rerolls. You can spend your special dice to activate different abilities, use them to block damage. And one other thing I want to cover is 2 particular cards. You have Dig In and Outmaneuver. These cards say you're going to discard 1 ground tactics card from your hand to block up to 2 damage, and this one works the same way for space battles. Now I was able to ask the developer on this one because this one threw me a little bit. When you use these cards, you must discard a separate card as well as this card to be able to use it. So you'll have to use 2 cards in order to activate its ability. When a player moves units to a system that contains his opponent's units, a combat is going to be resolved. And a combat will only be resolved if both players have units in the same theater, which there are 2 theaters, space and ground. So let's go ahead and look at an example of this. We're going to go ahead and say it's the rebel player's turn, and he's going to place one of his leaders in this system here. From there, then he can move any units from any adjacent systems to that system. So let's go ahead and start a battle. He's going to go ahead and move all of his spaceships over. And then he's going to move his ground units. And again, we need enough transportation to move all of our ground units. So we have a transport that'll give us 4, a Corvette will give us 2, and the cruiser will give us 4. So we have plenty of room for all of our guys. From here, then, if a player does not have a leader with tactics values, in the system, he may take 1 leader from his pool and add it to the system. You're going to start with the current player first, and he must decide if he is adding a leader before his opponent does. As our rebel player already has a leader, it'll go over to the Imperial player, who's going to throw Darth Vader in there to help out. And then after adding leaders, starting with the current player, each player may use a Start of Combat action card if they choose, which our players don't have any right now. Then we're going to move on to drawing tactic cards. So each player is going to draw space and ground tactic cards according to the leader's value. If a player has multiple leaders in a system, only use the highest value from each or for each of the values. And then the players only draw tactic cards in space or ground, or both if players have units in these areas. The current player draws first, and then the other player. So our rebel player will be the first one to draw, and his leader is 2 ground and 1 space tactic card. So we've got these 2 for ground, and concentrate fire for space. And then Darth Vader will get 2 for space, so he's got critical hit and outmaneuver, and then he also has 3 for ground. So concentrate fire, unstoppable assault, and escape plan. And normally our players are going to keep these hidden, but I'm showing these face up so you guys can see what we have. But like I said, normally these are kept hidden. The next combat step is the combat round itself. Players are going to resolve a combat round in which each unit performs 1 attack. We're going to start with a space battle, so the current player is going to attack with all of his ships, followed by the other player doing the same. This is only done if both players have ships in the system. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go ahead and start with the rebel player. So we're going to gather up his dice. So he has 2 X-Wings, which the X-Wings are going to give him 1 black dice apiece. And he has 2 Y-Wings, which are going to give him 2 red dice. The transport does not provide any dice for attacking. Then we have the Corvette, which is going to give us 1 black and 1 red. And finally, the cruiser is going to give us 1 black and 2 red. We're going to go ahead and give these a roll. All right, so not too bad. We got a couple lightsabers, a couple direct hits. This is a cracked one, so we'll re-roll that. A couple more hits. And then we're going to resolve. So during this phase, then we can play any of our tactic cards that match the theater that we're in. So we can only use space tactic cards for this. And then we can also spend our lightsaber icons to either draw additional tactic cards or activate tactic cards that require you to spend a set of lightsabers. So first off, let's go ahead and do some concentrate fire. This will allow us to reroll up to 2 of our dice. So let's go ahead and reroll these 2. All right, we got a couple more hits. And then we're going to go ahead and let's go ahead and spend 1 of our lightsaber dice to draw another tactic card in this theater. So this says take it down, deal 2 damage to 1 ship. And this one requires us to spend a lightsaber dice. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll spend the lightsaber dice to do that. We're going to spend it to do it onto the Star Destroyer. Then we have a couple of direct hits. So these can be played on any ship, as direct hits will bypass what a shipper is required. So for example, with the transport here, it can only be hit with red dice. Same with the Corvette and the cruiser. So in our situation here, the carrier and the Star Destroyer must have red dice, except for direct hits, which will allow the player to assign them to any ship. So we're going to go ahead and assign these to the Star Destroyer as well. And then we're going to go ahead and assign 2 hits to the cruiser. And let's go ahead and switch up one of these we'll put 1 on each of the 2 TIE fighters. Then our Imperial player can play any of his cards that he has if he has any blocking cards. So it says discard 1 space tactic card from your hand to block up to 2 damage. So with this card, he has to discard 1 other card and that card to block up to 2 damage. So he's going to go ahead and do that, and that will block 2 damage. So he's going to take these 2 away from his Star Destroyer. Then we're going to go ahead and remove units. So these will be added to his area. He gets to attack with these units, but after that, then they'll be destroyed. And his Star Destroyer took 2 damage. So then he's going to go ahead and roll all his dice. So with his guys, he has 3 TIE fighters, so he gets 3 black dice. Then he has the carrier, which is going to give him 1 black and 1 red. And finally, he has a Star Destroyer, which also will give him 1 black and 2 red. So he got a bunch of lightsabers and 1 direct hit. So let's go ahead and spend some of these to see if we can get some better cards. So we have Defensive Maneuver, block 1 damage. That's not going to help us. We'll spend another one. We have draw 2 tactic cards from either deck. And so let's go ahead and do that. We'll spend that to activate that. And we'll take 1 for space, which lets us block another damage. And 1 from ground, which lets us do a bombardment. So the Imperial player did not do very well. He's only got 1 direct hit. So he's going to go ahead and put it on the cruiser, which our other player doesn't have any tactic cards left for space, so he's going to take 1 damage on our cruiser. Then we'll move into the next step, which is a ground battle. The current player resolves 1 attack with all of his ground units, followed by the other player. Again, this is only done if both players have ground units, which we do. So we'll start with our rebel player. He has 5 troopers, which are going to give him 5 black dice. And he has 2 air speeders, which are going to give him 1 black and 1 red dice apiece. Now, we can only roll a maximum of 5 dice of each color, so we're already at our 5 dice, so we can't roll any additional ones there. So we're going to go ahead and give these a roll. All right, so we did fairly decent. And we've got a couple of symbols, so this one will let us deal 1 damage to 2 ground units. So we're going to have to save that, and we'll go ahead and spend 1 to draw another card. So this gives us Concentrate Fire, lets us reroll up to 2 dice. So we're going to go ahead and do that. All right, so not too bad at all. So let's go ahead and spend this one first to activate this card here. This lets us do 1 damage to up to 2 ground units. So let's go ahead and put 1 damage on both the AT-AT and the AT-ST. Then we're going to go ahead and spend a critical hit to do another damage to the AT-ST. That'll be its 2 damage. And let's go ahead and spend our 2 direct hits onto the AT-AT. And we'll do another one with that, and 1 onto a Stormtrooper. So then our player can play cards if he has any blocking. All right, and he does not have any cards that can block, so we're just going to do straight damage. So he's going to lose his AT-ST. He'll lose 1 trooper, and the AT-AT also took 4 damage, so that's going to go down. And then our rebel player at that point is going to play one of his objective cards, which this one says that you play it during combat, play after at least 3 health worth of Imperial units have been destroyed in a combat you've instigated. So at this point, then we're going to move the rebel symbol down 1 point on the track. And then we're ready to move into the Imperial player's ground battle. So he has 3 troopers, which are going to get him 3 black dice. His AT-ST gives him 1 black and 1 red. The AT-AT gives him 1 black and 2 red. And then he'll go ahead and give those a roll. Not too bad. He got 1 lightsaber, a couple direct hits. And let's see if he's got any cards that'll help him. He does have Concentrate Fire, so he'll do that to reroll 2 dice. No luck. And he's going to spend 1. He's going to go and spend 1 lightsaber to activate Bombardment, which deals damage equal to the red attack value of one of your ships, which obviously he's going to use the Star Destroyer, so it's going to do 2 damage. and he'll go on one of the air speeders for that. He's going to send these two onto the other air speeder. And let's go ahead and do one on the troopers, and he has one red dice left, so he's just going to place it on another air speeder. You can assign more damage than a unit can take. And our rebel player doesn't have any cards left, so he can't block anything, so he's going to lose both of his air speeders. And one trooper from that combat. All right, so at this point, then we'll move into the next step, which is retreat. Start with the current player. Each player can choose to retreat. From there, then the last step is the next round. So if both players still have units in the same theater, space or grounds, they're going to resolve another round of combat. Now, there's a couple important notes with this. If the only remaining rebel ground units are structures, and there are still Imperial ground units, then the structures are going to be destroyed. And if the Imperial player only his remaining ship is the Death Star under construction, and the rebels still have ships, the Death Star under construction will be destroyed. The last step in a combat round is the retreat option. Starting with the current player, each player can choose to retreat if they want to. So I'm going to go through the steps of retreating now. I've set up a different board with a different example for you guys. So this will show the different options. So first off, with retreating, to retreat from combat, a player must take one of his leaders from the system and place it in an adjacent system that has his units or his loyalty marker if able. He cannot retreat to a system that contains his opponent's units or a system that his opponent moved from if he initiated the combat. If there is no adjacent systems containing his units or loyalty marker, he can retreat to any adjacent system that does not contain units. An Imperial player cannot retreat if he has a Death Star or a Death Star under construction, and a player cannot retreat if his opponent does not have any units in the system. When retreating, you must move all ships out of the system. The player can choose to leave ground units or ties if it's the Imperial player. A leader can retreat only if the player is also retreating units, and each player can only retreat once from a combat, even if they have multiple leaders. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this now. Like I said, we've already initiated a combat in this sector here, and we've resolved both a space battle and a ground battle. So at this point, our leaders can choose whether or not to retreat, and our rebel player is getting pounded pretty good in space. He's taken some damage already, so he is going to choose to retreat. So at this point, he's going to move his leader to an adjacent system that either contains his loyalty marker or friendly units. So he has a couple choices. He can go to Alderaan with Princess Leia, or he can come up here as he has some units up there and regroup with a bunch more of his units. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to go ahead and move all of the space units because we're required to. And he's going to go ahead and leave his ground units as they're doing fairly decent in the ground battle. Now that we've resolved the retreat action with our rebel player, then the Imperial player has an option whether or not he wants to retreat. If he chooses not to, and there are still units within one of the theaters, whether it's space or ground, you would move into another round of combat and resolve it. So we do still have units in the ground battle, so they would resolve another combat. And again, keep in mind that you would not draw additional tactics cards as that takes place before the combat rounds. And then you would continue resolving combat rounds until the combat in the ground has been resolved, or that there's no units from both factions in either the space or the ground. So we could resolve another round of combat, and then the Imperial player could choose, okay, now it's time to leave, if he wanted to, and retreat the next round of combat. Either way, you must resolve all of the combat before moving on to the next turn. And once the combat has been resolved, any remaining units that are still in that sector or whatever that have not been destroyed can remove all of their damage counters and will return back to their full health. The final phase in a round is the refresh phase. So at the start of the refresh phase, if the rebel player has an objective card that he would like to play to complete, he can do that at this point. He can only ever complete one objective card during the combat phase and the refresh phase each turn. From there, then each player takes all of his leaders from the game board and returns them to their pool. If a leader is still on a mission card, return the leader to the pool and the card to the player's hand. The one exception to this is if the Imperial player was able to capture a rebel leader. At that point, then the rebel player will not regain that rebel leader. So we'll move all of our leaders back to their pools, including the leader on the mission card here. That'll be returned to the player's hands. From there, then, each player is going to draw 2 new mission cards, and if he has more than 10 mission cards in hand, he's going to discard down to 10 cards. So then each player will draw 2 new cards. The Imperial player will draw 2 cards from the probe deck. He's going to keep these cards secret from the rebel player, so we've drawn Malastare and Yavin. So at this point, we know that the rebel base is not in either one of these systems. So we'll keep these hidden from the rebel player, and we'll just put those off to the side. The rebel player draws 1 objective card and adds it to his hands, and there's no limits to the number of objective cards that a rebel player can have, and they do not count against his mission hand size limit. Next, we're going to advance the time marker 1 space, and if that space has a recruit or build icon, then we're going to also resolve those now, which this space has both. So first we're going to look at the recruit icon. And with the recruit icon, each player is going to draw 2 cards from their action deck and then choose one of those to keep and recruit the leader from that card. So let's go ahead and look at this. We have the rebel player, and he's going to flip over 2. So he has a choice between Wedge, Luke, or Lando Calrissian. So we're going to go ahead and take Luke. So he's going to be added to our leader pool. And then this card will be stored secretly, which it has a special ability that can be activated when listed 1 time. So we're going to keep this, and then the other card that we did not select will be placed face down at the very bottom of our action deck. And then the Imperial player will go ahead and do that same. Then let's go ahead and handle the build icon. So players simultaneously build new units. Each player builds 1 unit matching each resource icon on his loyal and subjugated systems. For subjugated systems, only the leftmost resource icon will be built, and each player takes these units from the supply and places them on his build queue in the space matching the number to the left of the resource icon. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. I'm going to go ahead and do the Imperial player for this one. So we're going to start up here in Kessel, and he's going to build 1 unit according to his sheet, which is a Stormtrooper, and it'll be placed in his queue in the number 1 slot. Then moving down, we're going to go ahead and do this one, which is a ATST, and that will also be in the 1 space. Then we have a Stormtrooper and a TIE Fighter for that one, and those will both go into number 1. Going down here to Coruscant, we have another Stormtrooper in the number 1 space. Moving over to our next one, we have a TIE Fighter and a Star Destroyer. That will go into the number 3 space. Then for this one, this is a subjugated system, so we're only going to build the leftmost icon, which is a Stormtrooper, and he'll be placed into 2. And finally over here, we'll get a TIE Fighter and an Assault Carrier, and those will be placed in 2 as well. The final step in the refresh phase is to deploy units. Starting with the rebel player, each player is going to slide all of their units 1 space down their build queue. Any units that slide from the 1 space onto the board are ready to be deployed. So with our rebel player, we'll start with him. All of his units are going to be moved off, and so all of those units will be ready to be deployed. Then the Imperial player will do the same, so those units will be deployed, and then these will move down 1 space each. Then the players are going to deploy these units into systems that have their loyalty or subjugation markers. Each player can deploy a maximum of 2 units in each system. The rebel player may build units from and deploy units in the rebel base space, and systems that contain an opponent's unit or a sabotage marker cannot build units, nor can they have units deployed in them. And then after deploying, players can begin a new round. So let's go ahead and look at an example of this. We'll start with the rebel player who's got a whole bunch of units. So he's going to go ahead and put 2 ground units in Kashyyyk. Then he has, let's go ahead and put a X-Wing and a Y-Wing in the rebel base space. And let's go ahead and throw a couple more ground units back up in Nal Hutta, where we had our big battle. And we'll have to put a couple units in Bathwana. And finally, he'll throw his last unit in Naboo. Then we have the Imperial player who's going to go ahead and refortify some of his stuff. So let's go ahead and throw one there. And we'll throw a TIE Fighter up here with another ground unit. And he'll go ahead and put his last couple ground units in those spaces. From here, we're ready to start a brand new round. The Imperial player will be able to play mission cards that will allow them to attempt to capture rebel leaders. When captured, a leader cannot oppose missions, be moved by the rebel player, or returns to the rebel leader pool. Captured leaders do not prevent rebel units from moving out of their system, and the Imperial player can move a captured leader like any other ground unit, and it does not count towards their transport capacity. When a mission is attempted against a captured leader, that leader will oppose the mission even though it is captured. And the Imperial player can only have one captured leader, so if he captures a second one, the first one is rescued. And when a captured leader is rescued, remove its ring and place it in the rebel base. So the Imperial player, say for example, he plays a mission to capture rebel operative, and Darth Vader is going to move into Alderaan where he has Imperial troops and we have a rebel leader. And they go ahead and attempt the mission, and the Imperial player is successful. So he is going to place the captured token on this rebel leader. So that'll just go right onto her movement tray. And now all of a sudden our rebel leader is captured. I'd like to take a closer look at how markers work now. So the first one we have is a sabotage marker, which the rebel player can place on a system when he completes a certain mission. When a sabotage marker is on a system, neither player can use that system's resource icons to build new units, and units cannot be deployed on that system. Then we're going to go into loyalty markers. So players are going to mainly gain loyalty in a system by resolving diplomacy missions. Having loyalty in a system allows the player to use the system's resources to build new units. When a player gains one loyalty in a neutral system, he is going to gain control of it. And when a player gains loyalty in an enemy system, it will become neutral again. So if the Imperial player gained loyalty in this system now, then it would revert back to being neutral. The one exception to this is Coruscant, which is always going to be loyal to the Imperial player and cannot gain or lose loyalty. The final token we have is the subjugation token. When there is at least one Imperial ground unit in a system, and it does not have an Imperial loyalty marker on it, the Emperor or the Empire is going to subjugate that system. If at any time there is not Imperial ground troops in a subjugated system, move its subjugated marker and it reverts back to either its rebel loyalty or neutral. So in this situation, if the rebel player was able to kill that trooper, then this would revert back to its neutral standing. But if the rebel player had control over it again and it was subjugated and he killed that trooper, then it would revert back to his standing. Now, the other important thing is that Imperial players can use subjugated systems' leftmost resource icon to build new units. So, in situations where a system has multiple icons on here, the Imperial player can only build the leftmost icon. The final thing I want to look at is the Death Star, which follows all ship rules, plus the Death Star does not have a health value and cannot be assigned or dealt damage. The Imperial player cannot retreat any of his units if he has a Death Star or Death Star under construction in combat. And they are space stations, not capital ships or structures. To build a Death Star, the Imperial player is going to need the Construct Death Star card, which is going to allow them to build a second Death Star. When the card is resolved, the player places a Death Star under construction in the mission space and places a complete Death Star on space 3. So it has to be resolved in a remote system. So let's go ahead and say that General Tarkin here is going to try to construct the Death Star. So he's going to place a Death Star under construction in the indoor space and a completed Death Star in the space in the third space. The Death Star under construction is immobile, so you cannot move it. And if an ability allows a player to deploy a Death Star in a system, it can only be placed in the Death Star under construction system. So if this somehow our Imperial player is able to move this up and it moves off where he's going to deploy it, he has to place it in that system. He can't choose to place it somewhere else. And if the Death Star under construction is destroyed, the Death Star in the queue is also going to be destroyed. So if the Rebel player is able to destroy our Death Star under construction, you will also remove the Death Star in the build queue. Well, I hope you guys found that video helpful. As always, if you guys have any questions or comments, leave those in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if you guys enjoy these videos, if you like what I do, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel, as it will help me to continue to grow and bring new and exciting games to you guys. And as always, thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my videos and to leave me feedback on them. I do really appreciate it, and I do take into account everything you guys say to continue to move forward and make the best possible videos for you guys. Also, if you guys are interested, swing by my Facebook and Twitter account. Let me know what you guys are playing, what you guys are interested in, or if there's games that I should be looking at, or games that you guys think that I would like or that I should be covering. As I'm only one person, I would love to hear from you guys. Let me know what is on the horizon, or anything you guys are playing, or things that you guys are interested in me covering. As always, thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys later.